Hi there, this is Mike Warren, senior editor at The Dispatch. You're going to be listening to a sneak preview of Dispatch Live, where we talked with John Aziz, a British Palestinian writer, about the situation in the Middle East. You can listen to the whole conversation, but you've got to join the Skiff over at thedispatch.com. You can see instructions in the description of this. Take a listen and consider joining the Skiff to get the whole conversation. Well, that's the abyss, right? That we are all sort of staring in, which is what you're talking about, a sort of peace movement among Palestinians seems. I can't think of something, if you look at the conditions or the polling that you describe in the piece, nothing could seem more remote in terms of likelihood at this point, maybe from certainly where we stand in the West, than that. Why should there be hope in the world for not just a peace movement among Palestinians, but one that can take hold and actually sort of change hearts and minds?
I think if you look at the situation in Gaza today, right, where there's so many people displaced, so many people have died, access to basic amenities like water and electricity are, if not completely gone, then at least severely limited. I would say that Palestinians in Gaza should probably look around and say the status quo really isn't working out for them. I think it's really important to, consider that countries that have made peace with Israel, like, Egypt and Jordan, they have a much more sort of normal condition in those countries compared to the situation in Gaza, right? So, and then if you compare to, other parts of the Middle East, the UAE, Saudi Arabia, for example, those are actually becoming quite wealthy countries at this point, very wealthy countries. So yes. I think in the long run, the premium that Palestinians are going to get from economic development and social development from reaching peace with Israel and living alongside Israel is going to be much greater than and much more beneficial to Palestinians than what they're experiencing now, because this is horrible. This is horrible. Yes. Nobody wants to live in the conditions in Gaza, right?
But this is. Go ahead, Adaam, please.
Just give John a chance to answer his thoughtful critic on the thoughtful platform now known as X, that you're in fact a shill for Israel. You're not starry-eyed about Israel's treatment of the Palestinians, and in fact, your family had direct experience with the bigoted element in Israel towards Palestinians. If you can tell us about that.
Right. Something I talked about in my piece of The Atlantic was, my father was, he when he was younger, he was a student studying physics. He went through a checkpoint in, the West Bank, which is where his home was. And he encountered a Kahanist soldier who told him, Arabs are too stupid to study physics. So no doubt, I'm a warts and all guy, right? There are bad racists on both sides, and there's bad policy and unfair policy from the Israeli government towards Palestinians, which to some extent serves as a mechanism for radicalizing Palestinians, right? Mm-hmm. Hamas can go to young people in Gaza, young people in the West Bank, and they can say, you are being treated terribly, so you should join us and you should fight for liberation. So I'm not an apologist for Israel. I'm really, from my perspective, I'm an advocate for a negotiated peace agreement on the terms of both of the peoples living there, both Israelis and Palestinians. They both have important, validity and an important perspective to bring to the peace negotiations that need to take place eventually, once we can get to a point where that's possible.
How do you explain? So, sorry, Mike. I wanted to address Jerry's question. So how do you address the fact that those numbers show up so firmly on the side of Hamas, so surprisingly firmly on the side of Hamas, where there doesn't seem to be a lot of desire to hold them accountable on the Palestinian side for what's happening?
I during the piece, in the piece, I sort of went into some prospective reasons that you might be able to explain it. And one aspect could be wartime bravado, right? Like when there's a war, people kind of rally around the troops, so to speak. Another one is
it's the anti-Hamas version.
Right, exactly. So there's also the kind of tribal honor culture, which would obviously say that, from the point of view of the Palestinians, that we're Palestinians and we're going to support the Palestinians. So there's that aspect. There's also the fact that Hamas can be quite repressive and violent towards their critics. So speaking out against Hamas, even in a anonymous or semi-anonymous poll, might be quite heavily discouraged. There's also a problem with a large amount of anti-Semitism that is kind of endemic in Palestinian society. I dug up a poll from, it's from 9 years ago, but it was the most recent polling. And, you have things like 88% of Palestinians saying that Jews have too much control over global affairs. 78% saying Jews are responsible for most of the world's wars. So there is a deep current of anti-Semitism as well.
Let's not forget that the perpetrators of the attack were celebrating and being ecstatic about the prospect of killing Jews. So the idea of the Jew as the enemy is supersedes this nominal identity of a Zionist or a state, because Zionism doesn't really mean anything outside of the context of the Jewish invader, right? The Jewish colonizer.
I think generally speaking, the term is al Yahud, right? The Jews. So it's right. I think a lot of people in the conflict on the Palestinian side do view it as a conflict between Muslims and Jews, right? It's quite religiously orientated in that respect. So it is. I know not all Palestinians are Muslim either. People are going to harangue me over that. There are many Christian Palestinians, but it's a sizable minority. But ultimately, oftentimes the conflict becomes portrayed as a conflict between Muslims and Jews for control of land and control of the holy sites, the control of Al-Aqsa, the control of the Temple Mount. Mohammed Daif, who's the leader of the Al-Qassam brigades, when he explained the October the 7th attack, and his top reason was in order to establish control. To maybe I'm not quoting the exact words, but it was about the Al-Aqsa Mosque. It was about establishing dominance and control over the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So very much there is a religious dimension to this as well.
I mean, it is called the Al-Aqsa flood, right?
Exactly. That's Hamas in their own terms, right? If you want to,
Al-Aqsa is the name of the Muslim temple mosque on top of the in the vicinity of the
other side,
and it's the name of also the Islamic name for Jerusalem, right?
Right. Al-Quds.
Al-Quds.
Being the name for Jerusalem.
This is an embarrassment from the poor Arabic that I know.
Don't worry, Habibi, it's all good.